I want to press on with the rest of the program now and bring you back to the studio. I'm going to stay on this issue, though, because I'm joined from Darwin by Nova Peris, of course, the Australian Olympian champion and former Labor senator and Indigenous activist and Republican activist. Nova, good to catch up with you again. You've been such a strong voice for anti-Semitism too over the past year. You truly are a great Australian. And I admired the way you came out today to condemn what Lidia Thorpe had done. I mean, you're both Indigenous women, you've both served in the Senate, so your perspective was important. Give that to us now.
Yeah, I guess when you put your hand up to become a member of the Australian Parliament, you know that you are bound by rules and protocols, and the main one being that you swear allegiance to, when I was in there was the Queen and all her successors, now being King Charles, and that's what happened with Lidia. Lidia put her hand up and she went in on the Greens ticket. People voted for Lidia as a Green senator. Then she defected from the Greens and she's become a independent. And the behaviour yesterday was really, really not okay. And for her to be swearing in the Australian Parliament, F the colony and yelling at, for a treaty and all the rest of it as Charles, who effectively is a symbolic head of state for Australia. And you would know this also, Chris, that our, 1986 Australia Act actually effectively relinquished all our remaining constitutional ties between Australia and the United Kingdom. So, there's so many things to unpack yesterday around Lidia's behaviour, and I really felt sorry for that beautiful Auntie Violet Sheridan, who's a Ngambri Ngunnawal elder who welcomed wholeheartedly both Charles and Camilla to her country in Parliament House, and that was just, when she finished, it was, overtaken by Lidia's rant. And it's a sad indictment on an Australian parliamentarian in this country.
You're so right. There was a wonderful welcome there, an Indigenous welcome, and then that's turned on its head by someone being unwelcoming and effectively rejecting people. But you make the critical point. You're a Republican. There are a lot of politicians in our federal parliament and our state parliaments who are Republican, but they're mature enough to think they swear allegiance to the Crown. This is the current system, and they'll show respect for the system and the institutions and the people at the top of that institution, while they can work through normal democratic means to change that if they like over time. But you've got to have respect for the system if you sign up to it.
You do. You absolutely do. And if someone comes yelling and shouting at you, the first thing you're going to do is retract. You're not going to want to have it, engage in that conversation. And, you're aware that I was also a co-chair of the Australian Republican movement, which I left earlier on this year. But I go way back to the 1998 Constitution Convention, and sadly we didn't get up in 1999, and it was on Albanese's agenda to go perhaps next year or the year after, but because of the failed referendum yesterday, no one wants to talk referendum anymore. Sure. But what I'm sort of saying in all of this is I also want to make an important sort of connection to this, where in 2021, Charles, whilst the Queen was still alive, he represented her in Rwanda at the Commonwealth Heads of State meeting. And he actually acknowledged, his mother was ill, but he actually acknowledged that his institution that runs deep into the most painful period of our history. Now, we all know the impact of colonisation on all Commonwealth countries, but we can't change the past, Chris. And, I wrote a letter with 14 other Commonwealth countries who still come under the British monarchy, asking him to acknowledge that. And you do that in a respectful way, but also Lidia yesterday saying, give us back our, the repatriation of whether it's human remains or sacred sites, all that sort of stuff. But we have an organisation, the Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies, that's in the process of getting those things back. Yeah,
all that stuff's being done sensibly.
All the steps, absolutely.
That's why I just want to get your thought. Well, Lidia Thorpe really represents no one. No one's actually voted for her even individually. She's only in the Senate because of the Greens. But has she damaged the Indigenous causes? It's a particularly troubling and divisive time after The Voice and all the angst we saw last year. So for her to do this now, do you think it's damaging, or do you think all people on all sides will realise she's just a renegade with no manners?
I think you have to take her as an individual, or you ask her to have all the people that she so-called represents to put their name forward, because I've had a lot of people, especially the older generation, say that it was a disgraceful and it's embarrassing the way she conducted herself. You know, it's planets apart how Charles was acknowledged in 2018 when he came up to East Arnhem Land, and you had the, you know, traditional owners of that country, the Yolngu people, openly hearted, sat down and saw him as a leader of another country, sit down peacefully and talk with that mutual respect. And that's what great leaders can do. They can sit down and have these conversations. But for her, who does she represent? Because I'm telling you now, I've also been inundated by a whole heap of non-Indigenous people to say, that is really sad. We actually feel sorry for you that someone's actually gone out saying that they represent Aboriginal people, when in actual fact, she doesn't. And, you know, I also need to make comment about the fact that, you know, yes, the Voice failed last year, but however, there were 19 out of 21 Aboriginal communities up here, 19 out of 21 that overwhelmingly voted yes. Now, she has said that she hates the colony, F the colony, but she swears allegiance to the Queen, accepts her assimilation. She's gone into the Australian Parliament, but she didn't want the Voice going into the Constitution because that was an act of assimilation. So which way is it? Do you know, it's like we as Aboriginal people, we wanted to be recognised. We wanted our voice, but that didn't get up. But, you know, we still have a long way to go, and we cannot dismiss the amount of people that supported the Voice. But it is what it is, Chris. And, you know, I long and pine for the day that we do become a republic, but that is a process that we as an Australian peoples, whether it's Indigenous and non-Indigenous and everyone who's come after, have to go to the polls and decide and shape this country.
I reckon I reckon there's one referendum that we could get up in a canter now, and that's if we had a referendum to change the Constitution to boot Lidia Thorpe out and put you back in the Senate. That would fix this up a bit. Thanks so much for joining us, Nova.